safe right now, and we will get through this as a community, and I hope that all of your families are safe. And this is a very difficult time, but it's a time that I'm actually optimistic about, because I think it shows what we can do as a community when it comes to the climate crisis. So I'm here today to talk about my line of work, which is another crisis which is occurring simultaneously alongside of the coronavirus. And actually, my origin story of how I got into the climate crisis involved meditation. So I know this community is big on health and wellness, and the intersection between health and wellness and our environment. They are so connected that if we are not healthy, our environment is not healthy, and vice versa. So when I first started grounded.org, which is essentially a climate solutions organization where we feature a lot of solutionists from all different types of solutions, drawdown solutions, renewable energy, regenerative agriculture policy, youth solutions, you name it. When I first started it, a wildfire devastated my community back in 2017, and it caused $9 billion worth of damage to my community. And at the time, I knew that climate change was occurring, but I thought it was like 100-year, 200-year problem that out of sight, out of mind, it's not occurring in my backyard. But then it literally was in my backyard with these mega fires. It felt like the apocalypse. And I had an epiphany around how in the news cycle, we're bombarded by doom and gloom and what's happening to our planet, and climate change being an existential threat, but there isn't a lot of reporting on solutions and all the solutions out there. And I befriended actually a mutual friend of Talia and myself, Paul Hawken, who wrote a book called Drawdown. So if you're going to take any book recommendations, I highly recommend you write down this book. Drawdown essentially was the first book of its kind to showcase 100 different solutions to the climate crisis. And it really showed me what's possible and how we can preserve a livable planet that isn't just a system we survive on, but actually thrive on. So Drawdown was really inspirational to me. I was working at my family business in the wine business at the time, Jackson Family Wines. And in the wine industry, you make sense of climate change through flavor descriptors. So this year's getting a little more fruit forward because of the heat. So I think every industry has a way of making sense of what's happening to them through their own myopic lens. But the climate crisis, it impacts all different sectors of society, and it's a multi-industry problem, but also a multi-industry opportunity. So I decided to consciously take a sabbatical from my family business. I was an environmental philanthropist at the time, so gifting to different environmental charities, and I felt like I wasn't doing enough as a philanthropist, and then also as a winery owner. So I decided that I had the crazy idea to start my own nonprofit organization to convene as many climate solutions as possible and bring them together under one roof with a summit convening, and bring policymakers, funders, influencers, and individuals that can really get the word out on climate solutions specifically. So I haven't been working in the wine industry for a few years now. I still, of course, enjoy wine, but I feel like I'm working in the family business from afar, because if we don't have a livable planet, then we won't have vineyards, we won't have a lot of agricultural crops. So that was I guess my story two years ago. And at the time, I learned transcendental meditation 4 years ago. And I really attribute launching Grounded and the success I've had so far convening all these solutionists with my transcendental meditation practice. If I did not have this daily practice of 20 minutes of meditating twice a day, there's no way I could be working in this line of work, because I'm sure just as you are, Cameron, bombarded by being in a crisis, it is very taxing emotionally, especially if you're empathetic to the world at large. And so my practice with transcendental meditation, I think a climate solution is meditation and is our self-care, because if we can't show up for ourselves and to have that sacred time of nourishing ourselves and being our best selves and cultivating a practice that enables us to really be our most present, authentic selves, then we won't be able to show up for others in the world. So for me, I'm very big on the healing arts and meditation, and I do attribute the launch of Grounded to my practice, my transcendental meditation practice. So for anyone interested in meditating, I highly recommend it. I've gifted, and not to go off on a tangent, but I've gifted a lot of my friends with TM, and there's many different practices out there. So I was doing that practice, and then 2 years ago, during the 2017 wildfires, right before I came up with the idea for Grounded, I learned Reiki, which is actually an ancient energy healing art, and I got attuned by a Reiki master on the island of Kauai. So I was out in Kauai healing from the stress and the post-traumatic stress symptoms of the wildfire that just devastated my community. And I found this amazing Reiki master woman at the Dolphin Wellness Healing Center in Kauai and Kapa'a. And I think it was about 4 days after I got attuned to my first symbol. There's like 3 different symbols in Reiki that you learn. It was about 2-3 days after I got attuned to that first symbol that I came up with the idea of Grounded. And I think connecting to your higher self and really getting aligned and grounded enables you to have vision and the creativity to be able to come up with your own business and ideas and help them grow. So I'm really big on the healing arts. I think that it's really important in this time for all of us to have that practice every day that grounds us. And that's why I named my organization Grounded, because I can't be doing the work in the climate movement if I'm not grounded myself individually. So that's a little bit about my background. I created a skeleton. I created a skeleton of what I wanted to talk about today, but of course I like interactive sessions. So if you guys have any questions at all, feel free to type them in the chat and I'm happy to answer them. I want to preface this with saying I'm not a climate scientist, though I've read a lot about the climate science and what's happening. But I really defer to a lot of experts in this field, but I am a concerned human being and humanitarian that wants to do my best to help. So anyways, today's talk, I think I want to cover 3 areas. And one of them is where we're heading and why 1.5 degrees Celsius matters. So I might be a little rudimentary. Most of you probably already know a lot of this, but I thought I'd go back to basics with where we're heading and why it's so important to be doing the work, supporting solutions and helping our environment. So if you guys are familiar, the IPCC report came out about 2 years ago, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It was a subsidiary of the United Nations, and it basically told us we have 12 years to have our emissions to stay below 1.5 degrees Celsius. The 1.5 degrees Celsius, 2 degrees Celsius comes from the Paris Agreement, which was all the world leaders getting together to agree upon global temperatures that we should not exceed if we are to preserve a livable planet. So they said to stay well below 2 degrees Celsius, but are recommending we stay below 1.5 degrees Celsius. and that 0.5 degrees Celsius difference does substantially create a lot of differences, because if we head towards 2 degrees or 3 degrees warming, then that contributes to feedback loops that are basically unavoidable, like ice-free summers in the Arctic and widespread diseases beyond our imagination that make the coronavirus pale in comparison, like the spread of malaria would be, and vector-borne diseases would increase substantially. They even say that with warming temperatures, the transmission rate between human beings and animals would increase 15%, which is quite substantial. So I think that actually the climate crisis is synonymous with disease crisis, because unless we get to the root and really address our rapidly warming temperatures, we will have many more diseases to deal with. So anyways, 1.5 degrees Celsius is our target, and we must reach that target by 2030. So that means we have about 10 years. And just how realistic is it to achieve that target? Basically, according to the IPCC report, we have a 66% chance of hitting the 1.5 degrees target by 2030. A 66-degree chance of hitting that 1.5 degree target in 6 years. And then the longer it goes out, the lower our chances. So I think in 9 years, we have about a 50% chance of reaching the 1.5 degree target. And then our that window of opportunity to reach that target, it decreases as the years go on. So in the next 6 years, is our highest likelihood of being able to stay on target. And we will have to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions 7.6% per year between 2020 and 2030 in order to reach that 1.5 degree target. So that is going to involve major infrastructure change. I mean, reaching this target will mean that we have to change all sectors of society. We need to convert our economy from being linear, extractive, and detrimental to one that is regenerative, equitable, and circular. We need to convert to renewable energy. But even if we were to convert and divest from the fossil fuel industry, there's still an abundance of carbon emissions in the atmosphere. So even if we were to completely turn our system to one that is in line with the 1.5 degree target, we still need to essentially draw down atmospheric carbon. So there's many ways, and I'll get into that in a little bit, we can do that. So there's two different things that I'd encourage people to think about. There's, of course, our society and the fossil fuel industry and how we are spewing so much carbon, and we must convert to a society that divests from fossil fuels and converts to renewable energy, and is one that reaches the 1.5 degree target. And then there's the atmospheric carbon. So we need to be, I don't like saying I was about to say tackling, but I don't like these like masculine sort of war terminologies they use in the climate movement. But I guess to turn around the climate crisis, we need to be addressing both atmospheric carbon and our emissions reductions in society. So why I'm a huge fan of Paul Hawken and his work with Drawdown is because it encompasses all of it. It really is the most holistic book I've read on the climate crisis in terms of solutions for the climate crisis. And so if we all follow Drawdown as a manual, and then we would definitely be living in a very healthy, thriving world. But the reality is we are emitting, we're emitting about approximately 40 billion tons of CO2 per year. And if you guys have ever heard of the 415 parts per million, That number is basically how much carbon there is in the atmosphere. So currently, there are people like Bill McKibben who have 350.org. He was saying that, and why he founded 350.org is that we shouldn't shoot above 350 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere. But currently we are at 415 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere. And so mathematically, 1 part per million is equal to 8 billion tons of CO2. And roughly we're releasing as a globe 3 to 4 parts per million per year. So that window of opportunity is closing, because the point of no return that the scientists say is the marker that we must stay below is 450 parts per million. So it's really like a math problem if you think about it, because we're at 415 and we have 450 parts per million, and we're closing that gap with releasing 3 to 4 parts per million, which 1 part per million again is 8 billion tons of CO2. So essentially, to distill it, we're releasing way too much carbon, and the only way to really address the carbon we have released in the atmosphere is through implementing vital solutions. So now I've laid out the problem, and I want to go more into what we can do about it, because that's why I founded my organization, grounded.org, because I was so inspired by people like Paul Hawken, who have a blueprint of solutions. Again, his book is Drawdown. He's actually writing a new book right now called Regeneration, with even more solutions. So there are a plethora of solutions out there to the climate crisis. A lot of them are actually super exciting. I would just be forewarned with any articles you read that might say that there's one silver bullet solution, like a carbon capturing technology or geoengineering, because essentially we need a symphony of solutions. We need to be deploying solutions in all sectors of society. Some solutions I'm most excited about, you can read about a bunch of them in Drawdown, but regenerative agriculture is showing a lot of promise. So basically, regenerative agriculture is a no-till philosophy, really basically no chemical farming, and regenerating our soil so that our soil is our ally, and our soil actually sequesters and draws down atmospheric carbon. So the healthier our soil is, the more it is likely to cool the planet. And they've done rough modeling in how much carbon can actually be sequestered from regenerative agriculture, and it's 1 trillion tons of CO2 if scaled globally, which would actually put us at 1870 levels of carbon in the atmosphere, which is pre-industrial revolution, which is actually really exciting. But the likelihood of us, oh wow, it's hailing right now in my backyard. The likelihood of us actually scaling to globally convert all agriculture to regenerative is pretty unlikely, though. If we could reach like 400 billion tons of CO2 sequestered, that's still a massive amount that can really help us with reversing carbon emissions and reaching the 1.5 degree target. Another solution that I'm excited about, I mean, there's so many of them. Our permafrost is thawing really rapidly, and last year at our summit, at Grounded Summit, we featured a permafrost scientist who's using grazing animals to keep the permafrost. Essentially, permafrost is ground that is frozen for 2 years or longer, but right now it's thawing pretty rapidly. So this gentleman, Nikita Zimov, is using grazing animals to keep the permafrost really compact and cool, so it prevents the CO2 and methane from being released from permafrost. There are carbon capturing technologies out there that actually suck carbon out of the atmosphere and convert it into basalt, or sell their carbon off to beverage companies like Coca-Cola. those technologies right now are pretty inefficient, but they are showing promise. I think the most important solution really is to conserve vital carbon sinks in nature. So the Amazon, for instance, is able to sequester 5% of global greenhouse gas emissions, which is massive. So that's why we must preserve the Amazon. And I also am a firm believer that we can learn from indigenous wisdom. So the marriage of modern day technology and society with indigenous wisdom and principles. Of course, a huge solution is social. All of us operating as a community and really working together. And I do believe we can learn from mycelium roots that help neighboring trees. And these trees scientists are now starting to understand that trees actually do communicate with each other. And they save neighboring trees and they swap nutrients. If there's a diseased tree, one tree will send vital nutrients underground under the mycelium root to be able to save the neighboring tree. So they all, if there's a disease or an insect that is going to impact the community of trees, they all band together to release different compounds that will prevent the insects from completely obliterating that community of trees. So I think as a species, we can really learn from nature and indigenous wisdom and each other about how we operate as a community. Part of my vision for Grounded really was to de-silo the environmental movement, because you think there are a lot of people working on this doing great things, and there are, but they're all super siloed. And I came in and I was like the naive, impatient outsider, like, why isn't everyone working together? And how do we get, like, why can't all the regenerative ag people band together and scale their efforts? And I had this level of impatience. And I see how they've been siloed, but I still, even 2 years into working in the climate movement, feel optimistic that they do want to work together. And environmental nonprofits were competing for a tiny slice of the pie, because less than 3% of all philanthropic giving goes to the environment, which is a tiny, tiny number. And then you have all these environmental NGOs competing for that 3% of the philanthropic pie. But my mission is really, how do we scale that pie to a much larger number? And then you get all the environmental NGOs to collaborate together to de-silo, so that we're operating as a united front of climate solutions in a community to be able to scale in time to reach the 1.5 degree target. So anyways,
Julia, I have a question actually, and that has to do with the theme that you're talking about right now before you go on to your other points. We were talking really quickly before this just about how this coronavirus situation has sort of made us all as a society have to band together to affect change for the entire community for kind of almost the first time maybe ever in our lifetimes. Mm-hmm. What are the types of things that people would have to do just in their day-to-day life, like the equivalent of the stay-at-home order for us to basically be okay and to stay under that mark in terms of the temperature change, and you know, what does that look like on a practical level? Like, what should we all do every day?
That's a great question, and that's a question I asked myself before I became more involved. And there's a lot we can do, actually. Consumption, so what you wear. The fashion industry actually is the second biggest contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions behind the fossil fuel industry. So you don't think fashion really would be contributing so much, but it really is. And the fashion industry, fast fashion in particular, actually produces 100 billion articles of clothing per year. And so we don't need more stuff. So I think it's really being real with ourselves. I think we're all like marketed, we need this, we need that. But in reality, living in simplicity and being happier with less stuff, I think I'd say number one, actually, ahead of composting, recycling. Where you put your dollars really matters. Also, who you bank with. A lot of people don't realize a lot of banks are spending billions of dollars drilling in the Arctic and investing in the fossil fuel industry. There's one bank in particular that's divested, and that's Bank of the West, and the parent company is BNP Paribas. So your 401k, who you bank with, what you wear, of course, composting. That's the one that in recycling people always talk about those, but I do think it's important to talk about the corporations you support. Another scary statistic is that 71% of all global greenhouse gas emissions come from 100 companies. So there are 100 companies in the world that are contributing to the vast majority of our greenhouse gas emissions. So just becoming more aware of like who those companies are and where you put your money really does matter. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it can feel really overwhelming to people when they're just going about their daily lives to try to tackle such a big problem on their own. And so I think it's really good to have that blueprint actually, and that you're talking about. Could you maybe share afterwards some of the problem banks, or maybe a good bank, or some of those solution oriented companies that people can put their money behind or use for banking?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a great new platform called Good Money, which is a new bank that's very conscious and particularly supporting ESG, real impact investing. And then Bank of the West, I moved my finances to Bank of the West. Yeah, there's so many amazing companies out there. I'd say that even, sorry if I sounded kind of like doom and gloom, it's like this fine line you tread between like sharing the basic facts of where we are and staying optimistic. And I would say I am optimistic because I've seen too many amazing people working on this crisis that just haven't had funding, or they haven't had policy support, or they've been siloed. And these people really, I think, will come out of the woodworks. I'm pretty optimistic, and they'll get a lot more support. I think human beings, and we're noticing it with coronavirus, are really reactive. So we're reactive to what's right in front of us. And the climate crisis is right in front of us. And the cadence of it being right in front of us will only increase. So I'm optimistic that people will galvanize behind these solutions, and we will preserve our species. There's some scientists saying it's too late and we're all heading towards extinction and we should all just give up. And I really disagree. I think that there's so many ways we can draw down atmospheric carbon and really preserve a livable planet. And then also hopefully move away from companies that are destroying our planet and our livelihood as a species, and move towards ones that are regenerative in principles.
Amazing. Thank you. That was an amazing answer. I think also Cameron has a question. Do you want to just ask it? I'm going to unmute you again.
Oh, okay. Didn't know I'd be participating this much. So this is something that I always rack my brain with, because I think we take this like 40,000 foot view on how the environment changes. So the question was like, if you can transport yourself 25 years into the future, what like small positive changes would you personally like to see?
Wow. Small positive changes or big positive changes?
Small positive changes. So like, I mean, whether it's coming from the family business you're in, or, even the way we interconnect, like mentally, right? How we work collectively. So it could be rather than, beating a great number or stopping the melting of the ice caps, like what is it that you could turn around on a Sunday afternoon and say, yeah, that's great?
Well, I don't know if this is a small change or a big change or a medium one, but it would be great if everyone could meditate uh, and take care of themselves, because at least with meditation, more blood flow to your prefrontal cortex means that you're making better decisions, you're operating with more empathy, and you're acting like a good community member. So I would love it if more people would meditate. I'm trying to think of what other small step I'd be happy with. I don't know if everyone meditating is a small step. That would be in my like utopian world. Everyone would learn to meditate, because a lot of this too is energy and intent. And so we're connected to our environment. Our environment's connected to us, and we are the planet, and the planet is us. We're all one. And so I think that meditation really is a solution, because it makes you have a more coherent environment around yourself as well. I mean, there's big solutions I would hope to see in 25 years from now. I mean, a president and world leaders that really value and serve their people. I was in meditation a week ago, and the Gettysburg Address randomly appeared in my brain. I don't know why. And then there's a quote I remember in it from Lincoln: of the people, by the people, for the people. And then literally a minute later, the line "of the earth, by the earth, for the earth" also happened in my brain. And the line is: a government that is of the people, by the people, for the people is the best government. And so for me, the two are identical. A government of the earth, by the earth, for the earth is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. So having world leaders that really prioritize the well-being of our species above short-term profits, I think that would be a major win. But that's a lofty, ambitious desire of mine. But I'm optimistic that all movements are led by the people, and I believe that we will all demand and vote for our survival as a species.
Thanks for the question, Cameron. Also, do you want to open it up to questions? I know you've also had some other points to get to. We can do that too.
Oh yeah, I see we're running out of time. Why don't we open it up to questions, if anyone is wanting to shoot any questions my way?
You can raise your hand, which is like a button somewhere. I don't know how to do it actually. I think there's a button that says raise hand, or you can type it in the chat.
I noticed there's someone from Costa Rica. Costa Rica is really like the leader of countries on climate. They're like one of the only countries meeting their Paris Agreement targets. So yay, Costa Rica. Costa Rica is amazing. In fact, the Minister of Environment, Carlos Manuel, is leading a big initiative. So it's really inspirational. Someone typed, everyone meditating would change the world for sure. I love that. Absolutely.
I have a question. Grounded.org, can you talk about your goals? I know you've thrown summits, and we're about to, except with all this Corona stuff, we can't meet in person. What's your mission there, and how can everyday people get involved? Where would you like it to be 5 years from now?
Thank you, Talia. 5 years from now, I'm hoping to be able to help accelerate a movement of climate solutions. So I'll go to grounded.org. That's the name of the organization I founded. I had a convening with a summit, bringing people together in a physical location, but since we just had to postpone our summit because of Corona, so it actually was supposed to take place March 18th and 19th, so I was pretty sad about that. But I did not want to risk everyone getting infected with Corona. So right now we're actually transitioning to an online platform. So we're iterating right now, but we're essentially wanting to have a solutions academy accessible to many different people. At first we thought maybe youth, but I think that there's so many different people that could benefit from learning about all the different types of solutions, and then we could have modules with different solutions and guest speakers. So all the masters, all the climate solutions masters or Jedi warriors that are masters of their particular solution would be able to have an educational video that would be accessible and free to all to be able to watch. So that's what we are iterating at the moment, and we're very preliminary. But 5 years from now, I hope that we do have an impact. I mean, like our friend Paul Hawkins says, the atmosphere hasn't noticed all of these climate gatherings, and I'm like, touche. When he said that, it's so true though. Like all these efforts are kind of useless if the atmosphere doesn't notice. So I hope in 5 years from now, the atmosphere notices my efforts or our collective efforts with climate solutions. That really is my goal, to have impact so that the atmosphere notices and we can actually reverse temperatures.
Amazing. So Alyssa has a question. She raised her hand, so I'm going to allow you to talk, Alyssa. I think you can unmute yourself now and go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, Julia, it's Elisa.
Oh, hi.
Love all of this. And this is I'm kind of setting you up here because I know you've shared so many amazing documentaries and places to go for content and knowledge and information. I was curious if you have any that you could share with the group.
Yeah, great. Thank you I was planning to cover that, so thank you for asking. Okay, so there's a lot of amazing books you can read. In fact, I'm actually reading this one right now. It's called The Future We Choose, Surviving the Climate Crisis by Christiana Figueres and Tom Carnac. And Christiana Figueres actually was responsible for creating the Paris Agreement. So this book is really amazing. She lays out two worlds we can live in, one where we reach our 1.5 degree target and what that would look like, and one where we shoot past that and head towards 2 to 3 degrees Celsius. So continue business as usual. So it's the future you choose. So I choose the 1.5, and it's a very educational, amazing book. The other book I mentioned earlier is Drawdown by Paul Hawken. It's less about, I mean, of course he covers the problem, but it's all solutions. So that's an amazing book. There is a book that is a little intense, but it lays out the world if we continue business as usual, and that is Uninhabitable Earth by David Wallace Wells. Maybe read it in doses. I read it and was in a little bit of a funk for a little while, but it's definitely a book that is based around all the science, but it doesn't really talk about the solution. So yeah, it's a very heavy book. So maybe I definitely would recommend this one and Drawdown. I'm also reading an amazing book called Braiding Sweetgrass, which is about learning from indigenous communities and indigenous wisdom, which was recommended to me by the founder of Conservation International, Peter Seligman. And he said it's his favorite book he's ever read, and I'm halfway through it, and it's an amazing book about how we can learn from nature. That's a great book. Gosh, there's so many of them. There's also one by Jonathan Safran Foer that just came out called We Are the Weather. That's a really good book about how what we eat impacts the climate crisis. So those are some, but I mean, there's so many of them, but those are books that really come to mind as books that are at least very eye-opening on the topic. I hope that's helpful.
Amazing. Thank you. That was great. I think that Ashley is typing them all into the chat if you guys want to copy them someplace. The chat does go away at the end of the meeting, so make sure that you're like screenshotting it or copying it someplace. I think there's a question up above. Eliza says, can you explain a little bit more about how to achieve a more regenerative, equitable, and circular economy?
Yes, well, I'm not an expert on our economy, though I do know that 9% of the global economy is circular, and that number's declining. How to achieve that? I mean, create more green jobs, divest from the fossil fuel industry, an economy that is circular, make sure that plastics, I mean, essentially we shouldn't be producing plastics, but they serve a purpose. But if we could create plastics with biobenign materials that biodegrade, that's much better than all the synthetic fibers and plastics that are ending up in our oceans. So creating and moving towards a circular economy would involve changing how we manufacture and changing demand as well. So we have to address our demand as consumers, and circulating what is produced so that it doesn't end up in the environment, so the whole product can be reused into the circular system is definitely important, and there are a lot of people working on it. But in terms of achieving a circular economy, it would be completely re-engineering how we manufacture plastics, how we make plastics, and also food waste, making sure that we are on top of the food that's wasted, because that's releasing a lot of short-lived greenhouse gas emissions like methane, which is a lot more potent than CO2. So I'd say to get to an economy that's more circular, regenerative, and equitable, we need to look at food and agriculture, and really convert from conventional farming that uses all these dangerous herbicides, pesticides, and GMOs, and farm the way we are meant to be farming, which is minimal inputs and not releasing greenhouse gas emissions. So I think that to achieve an economy, I'd say the number one sector we should look at actually is agriculture, because it contributes to 24% of all global greenhouse gas emissions. So if we could tackle agriculture itself, we could move towards an economy that is much more regenerative, and then of course circular with plastics and food waste. So moving towards that, I don't have the answers, but I know that there are amazing organizations out there, like regenerative agriculture organizations that are advocacy organizations that help equip farmers with tools to be able to convert their lands to more regenerative.
And what is the way as consumers that we can support that different agriculture industry? Is there a certain grocery store or type of produce or organization that we can give money to? Like what's the solution there as consumers?
I would say shop local, support local farmers, shop at farmers markets. I mean, this is in the age of no corona. Now it's a little more difficult right now, so it's hard. But I mean, your local grocery stores, I'm sure even right now, are stocking up. I'd say usually independent local grocery stores that mostly source organic, non-GMO are great ways to support a more regenerative economy, because supporting your local community, and it's supporting the farmers that are really using best practices. So I'd say shop local, shop at farmers markets once they're back up, and also grow your own food too if you can. If you have a backyard, I think it's great to be able to be self-sufficient and farmers ourselves.
Amazing. Anna says, when you spoke about the goals that would make your heart sing, especially governing for endangered species, it blew my heart open. It's a perfect time to plant that seed globally. how can we help you amplify this message?
Oh, that's really sweet. I'd say that to amplify is to educate yourself and to read. I'd say the list of books that I recommended, and just share on social, share what you've learned, and share why it's important to protect a lot of these endangered species. I mean, without biodiversity, our biosphere is responsible for our survival as a species. And particularly when it comes to health and wellness, without our bees, then we're really coming up against food insecurity and shortages, and we need our pollinators. So any way to get more educated and read more materials, I think will go a long way, and becoming your own activist. I'd encourage everyone here to read and whatever resonates with you. Maybe some of you will care more about what's happening to fisheries or the oceans. Maybe some of you will care about what's happening in policy. Some of you might care about what's happening in the farming industry. I mean, there's so many different sectors where we need to turn these around. And it almost can feel like the game Whack-A-Mole, where you hit one head and like 10 more pop up. But I think it's achievable. Once you distill it down and you break it down into all these different areas, like Paul does in Drawdown, you're like, okay, we can do this. We can get together. So I'd encourage you to, in terms of amplifying the message, just start to get involved in your local community, find out what's going on with your local environment, and then also read about, there's the microcosm of your own environment and your own community, which is part of the macrocosm of what's happening with the climate, which the two are together. And oftentimes the whole philosophy of not in my backyard is why there's so much climate apathy, because the Arctic's melting, yet you look outside and it's super sunny, but actually the Arctic will influence what happens in your backyard by increasing mega fires or storms. So it all is one interconnected system, and it all is one unified system where what we do in our community really has an impact on the greater whole. So be a good steward of your local community. Read what you can. Hopefully those books are a good starting point. There's so many more out there. Another book just occurred to me, Inconspicuous Consumption, by Tatiana Schlossberg. That's a new book that just came out on, essentially on, I haven't read it yet. I need to read her book because she gifted it to me, but it's about how overproduction and consumption and consumerism is contributing to the climate crisis. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. I'd say just read as much as you can, and then get active, become a climate activist. All of us can be climate activists.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I think technically we're out of time, but I mean, I think we have time for another question if anyone has one, or if you have any final points that you would like to cover in maybe like 5 more minutes. Feel free to wrap it up however you'd like.
Oh, these are sweet messages. Thank you everyone so much. I don't usually do this, so I'm kind of a little bit more of an introvert. So if I went off on like tangents, I hope it's strung together. Okay. But
you're an absolute font of information. I'm just gonna like sit here and just like soak it in for like, I need to like replay it 5 times. It'll be posted so you guys can listen to it 5 times if you need to. But no, it was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes. And you're just calming, and like when I met you, very centered, and I think what's beautiful is you're for this bigger message more so than like your own self-interest. And that's, that's rare nowadays, and it's the humility is very apparent. So thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you. I do think that back to meditation and Reiki, I do think that the healing arts do cultivate more empathy in all of us. And I do think that we can all tap into a greater reservoir of empathy if we have our own healing tools. That's why I love your community. I'm like, yay, because it just helps you be a better person when you're doing the self-care.
Well, thank you. My dear friend Jordan has a question. She's done some really interesting stuff in the environmental and wellness realm as well. Do we have time do you have time for another question?
Yeah, I have time if you guys have time.
Okay, Jordan, you are allowed to talk.
Oh, thanks. No, I just wanted to really say thank you and for your eloquence, and also for being such an incredible translator. I think some of the most important people, in the space and regenerative agriculture is so broad and so big, and there's incredible scientists and researchers, and then the folks like Paul and Gregory Landaway and Daniel Christian Wall and all of those guys that are so well versed and have been in this work for 25 years. But I have not either. I've been in it for a couple years, and I'm just so grateful for your perspective and also for your ability to really be a bridge, because I think what is needed, and so we get buy-in from the wellness community and the yoga community and the fashion community, is people who have the ability to really act as kind of the go-between what's happening and the numbers and the science and the IPCC and all of that, but then can also really translate the multidisciplinary community that has to come together to do this, because it's no longer the responsibility of just the people in the climate space. So I'm really grateful. Thank you for the work that you're doing. It's really important.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the work you're doing. I mean, you're working on one of the most important climate solutions. So thank you so much for being in the regenerative agriculture space. I think that's amazing. I have a lot of respect for you and that work too. So thank you for the work you're doing. And I'll try to continue distilling and being a bridge. I think women in general are like the Dalai Lama says, that it's women that will save the world. And I think men too. I mean, I think we all have like our divine masculine and feminine. There's so many great men and women out there, but I do think that women are natural community builders and bridges. So I think all of us are in this together as one, and I hope that the atmosphere notices. I really do. We have no choice. So I'll continue working, and this is my life mission. So I'm committed to this for the rest of my life.
Amazing. Well, I'm definitely going to sign up at grounded.org. I wish that it was in person, but I know it will be probably next year. So
yeah, we're still trying to determine a date, and I think that every challenge brings a new opportunity, in that it had us reimagine our whole concept of the summit convening, which if not this virus, then what will happen next year, what megastorm might happen. So not to go completely away from the summit convening, because we love our community, but we need way more eyeballs on solutions, and we need the masses to fall in love with climate solutions and have hope. So my mission really is, and our collective mission should be, with climate solutions, to have mass adoption of them, and that involves way more eyeballs. So we're trying to iterate a way to scheme to build a big climate movement around climate solutions, because there, of course, are people like Greta Thunberg, who's done a phenomenal job with creating a movement on the climate crisis and the youth movement. Now we need to mirror that with the solutions, and I think we can.
Amazing. Thank you. And we're going to add another category of wellness practitioner on our site. It's going to be like climate wellness, planetary wellness practitioners.
Yeah.
I think that we're out of time. Do you guys, Talia, Ashley, do you have any last notes before we close out?
No last notes, just a lot of gratitude. I'm excited to do some Reiki with you in the future too. But other than that, thank you so much for giving us your time and sharing your heart and your mind. Really appreciate it.
Thank you guys. This is a beautiful community. And